information, and particularly credit information, to be encrypted so that if it is intercepted, it can't be used by the pirates. But U.S. laws right now prohibit the export of the very powerful encryption technologies. So this is a very big issue. And the number one issue that, or impediment, I should say, to electronic commerce is security, or the perception of a lack of security of information. So that's an issue that you're going to want to keep on top of and see how it develops. But in this country, the trend is toward loosening up the law against exporting the more powerful encryption algorithms to other countries so that it can promote international electronic commerce.
Can I add something there? If the question if security is a real concern of yours and you are thinking of starting a business but you're worried about this topic, which, as Larry says, is indeed an issue, you should be aware that there is another separate trend here in the USA, which is to establish electronic banking systems whereby you would not ever be at risk of being the victim of fraud. You'd contract with an electronic bank that would undertake that risk on your behalf. Of course, you will pay them a certain percentage for assuming the risk for you, but that is an option.
Thank you for your questions. We now turn to Module 2 in our presentation. In this module, Stuart Harris will present to us the trends in email, entertainment, supersites, searching the internet, and even the fuzzy edges of cyberspace.
I want to express special thanks to my friend Larry Edwards, first for an excellent presentation, but most particularly for dealing with the business aspects of the emerging interactive society, as we're calling it. That leaves me free to deal with topics that I'm personally far more comfortable with: the social, cultural, and leisure components of this new global neighborhood we are fashioning out of silicon and glass fiber. The assault on the internet by big business was predicted for a very long time. Now it's truly underway, and I don't underestimate the importance of it. But I do thoroughly endorse some of the cautions that Larry just expressed. A recent study by 13th Floor Internet Services produced the information that 90% of merchants using those internet shopping malls were dissatisfied with the experience, and no less than 50% reported that they've yet to receive their first order from an internet customer. Well, let's just take the measure of the web by taking another look at that most popular site of all, Yahoo, the subject index that's consulted 65 million times a day. Business is only one of 14 major subject categories in this bird's eye view of the web. During my presentation, I'll be using examples from some of the other categories. And at the end, I'll discuss the nuts and bolts of what you need in order to plug into this huge resource. As I did in my presentation to this conference a year ago, I'd like to remind you first that although the web gets all the publicity, it's only one of many protocols of the internet. Protocols are basically ways of getting information from place to place. I can tell you that nothing has transformed my life in the information age more powerfully than email, which has nothing to do with the web. Email allows me to conduct almost instantaneous business, make contact with experts, and keep in touch with my children in England, all at no cost. It's the closest thing to a miracle I've ever seen. Mail list servers are the most passive way of getting information from the internet. Subscribe to one of these interest groups, and messages on that topic float into your mailbox on a daily basis. Any contributions you may make are in turn seen by all the other subscribers. Whether you're a Japanese doll collector or a 10-pin bowling fan, there's a list for you. I subscribe to about half a dozen of these lists, and that generates more than enough interesting mail for me. I've noticed the technical lists getting much more international lately, although English is the lingua franca of the mail lists and news groups. We English speakers appear to be learning to be tolerant of the global community. I've seen messages lately from Latvia, Hungary, China, Mexico, and although they aren't written in perfect English, they're given no less consideration. That's a new development and a very positive one. Well, speaking of foreign languages, it isn't hard to get information in any language you like on the web. This here is an edition of the Gazeta Mercantil. It's a Brazilian business journal. Its internet edition is published in 3 languages. Closer to home, you can find internet editions of not merely the big newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, but thousands of local papers like the Scottsbluff Star Herald of Nebraska, just to take an example at random. Now, this is strange when you think about it. Newspapers are supposed to be for sale. In fact, they are for sale. Why then are they offering what has demonstrable value for free to net surfers? The answer is not easy to find. In a piece for The New Yorker earlier this year, media analyst Kurt Anderson wrote, "They justify the practice vaguely as brand protection and R&D, but the reasons look more to me like confused mixtures of vanity and panic." I'm inclined to agree with that judgment. It isn't necessarily a public service to take something that was written and designed to be read on paper and force it into a completely different medium. Too often, the result is something that brings out the worst in both the old and the new technologies. But news vending does have a very important place in the emerging interactive society, and it's only just dawning on most people what that place is. The web newspaper that's drawn most comment lately is the so-called Drudge Report. That's a scandalous gossip sheet put out by a freelance journalist called Matt Drudge. Drudge is practically a one-man band and makes no claims for the accuracy of what he reports. He doesn't have time to check, he says. So why does anybody pay attention? Because this is a service unlike anything the conventional media have to offer. This is pure cyber info, not just a migration into the web from some other medium. It is said that the Drudge Report is now used quite often as an unattributed source by mainstream journalists. Another feature of the new journalism is what I call raw news, namely the wire service reports, updated every minute or so and available for free on the web. These snippets are what journalists themselves use as their starting point in reporting the day's news. So, if you're a news junkie, or if there's a big unfolding story going on, why wait for some journalists to simply rewrite what's on the wire? The web sometimes even allows us to interact with our personal heroes. One of mine is the author, teacher, and reform feminist Camille Paglia. Well, thanks to a site maintained by Salon magazine, I can ask Professor Paglia's opinion about whatever might be puzzling me about contemporary culture. Of course, I'm not guaranteed an answer, but just the thought that I'm in some interactive relationship with such an intellectual giant is pretty nice. More seriously, where the conventional printed media really do come into their own in the interactive society is in the business of archival research, using the libraries and the back numbers that were previously so hard to get access to. This is me doing some research for this presentation, browsing the archives of the San Diego Union Tribune. Entering a couple of keywords yields a list of 6 recent articles of interest. I can see a summary for free, and because I have an account with this news source, I can also download complete articles if I wish. It'll cost me $1.50 per article. As someone who has frequent need for information and also has bitter memories of verbal jousting with obtuse reference librarians in the pre-internet era, I'd say this type of access to instant data is well worth the small cost. In fact, so far as I'm concerned, that one function justifies the cost of my internet connection and maintenance of my desktop computer many times over. My next theme is entertainment. Use of the web as an entertainment medium, I mean. And there's good evidence that in this respect, some people have been reaching too far and too fast. And the headlines have been concerned with failure as often as success. Last October, for example, America Online launched an entertainment service that they called the Entertainment Asylum. It was an ambitious undertaking featuring all of the ingredients that make a Hollywood groupie drool: industry gossip, film clips, advanced news, live chats with the stars, and so forth. Well, 3 months later, and with a lot less fanfare, the asylum lost its programming president, Scott Zacharin, and 50% of its staff in what was officially called a company restructuring. 2 weeks later, Microsoft Network abruptly shut down several ambitious multimedia entertainment sites. Another 40 talented people lost their jobs. The Entertainment Asylum still exists, and anyone can examine it to see its strengths and its weaknesses. Just go to the address you see on your screen, see all the goodies on offer, and unless you have a really super-duper computer, watch your system creak and groan as it tries desperately to keep up with the flow of multimedia. The problem is that these multimedia sites have already outgrown the available bandwidth for most users. Writing in the journal Teleconferencing Business this year, Mike Sodergren, president of Streamline Communications, put it, I think, quite well. He wrote, "Widespread user acceptance of real-time multimedia over digital networks is dependent on delivering quality of service that's consistent with their visual point of reference, namely broadcast TV." Exactly. With hundreds of TV cable channels to choose from, why would consumers of entertainment migrate to a new medium in which the picture is half the size, it's poor definition, and half the time it can't keep up with the sound? Now, I'm not saying there's no future in web-delivered multimedia, just that the future is not now. And I'll have some more to say about that bandwidth question in a few minutes. I can, however, personally guarantee one thing. The moguls who set up and then dismantle these megasites may be overreaching the technology, but they are right about one thing: the public's appetite for entertainment information. My own company, Zoom San Diego, maintains 2 databases of entertainment information. One is general events, including theater, sports, outdoor activities, and so on. And the other is absolutely dedicated to the daily schedules of the feature movies that run on the 350 plus screens in our city. Now that raw data is fed daily to our own website, to America Online's so-called digital city, and to other clients as well. The actual presentation varies a great deal, but the underlying data is all the same, and it's what we have to sell. Now, you'd think that one or possibly two sources of this type of information would be enough for a city of 1 million plus people. But let me tell you, we have a lot more competition than that. There are at least 6 other major websites offering the same information in their own way. It may be packaged very differently, but it really isn't different. If the movie Titanic has showings at 7:15 and 10 p.m. at such and such cinema, there aren't a hell of a lot of different ways of saying that. Because these sites offer information about entertainment rather than the entertainment itself, I call them meta-entertainment. What's even stranger than the sheer number of these sites is that we're not competing with each other for the dollars in our clients' pockets, except in the most indirect way. Our data is free for the taking. We compete for numbers. Web traffic used to be measured in hits, but as my colleague Larry Edwards already said, that crude measure is regarded now as hopelessly imprecise. People talk these days either in terms borrowed from the publishing industry, impressions, or in new jargon, click-throughs. We, like everyone else in this business, keep very careful records of who uses our data and what they request. This screen, for example, lists the current favorite movies and movie theaters of our users. In a good week, we service about 20,000 requests. Not as much traffic as some, more than others. So who cares? Ultimately, the advertisers, of course. We don't sell advertising space ourselves, but the people that we sell our data to sell advertising. And it's the numbers that determine the value of the space, just as in any other medium. You know, perhaps this isn't such a weird situation after all. No mass circulation newspaper or magazine in this country makes money from its cover price. There's one magazine that claims to be an exception to that general rule. It's a women's magazine. Well, fine. The point still stands. In this city, San Diego, there are several weeklies that are literally given away for free. The revenue is all in the advertising. What's in the future for us? I wish I knew. One trend is fairly clear. In the drive to attract more users, to report more and more click-throughs to the advertisers, most of these sites are diversifying into what the users demand, or at least what they think the users demand: chat rooms, bulletin boards, do-it-yourself movie and restaurant reviews, classified ads, and so on. The screens that you're seeing right now are samples from the America Online, or as it's commonly known, AOL site. But you can find the same stuff many times over on the web. In a very real sense, this admixture of people searching for meta-entertainment and getting feedback from each other in the process actually is a portrait of the interactive society as it exists right now. Well, that leads me very directly into my next theme, the concept of the supersite. It's been very interesting watching this idea grow, and all too predictable perhaps, because if anything in American culture seems like a success, somebody's going to think it'll be more of a success if there's more of it. In the long ago days when America Online was an upstart company, all of 5 years ago, good heavens, it was very easy to draw sharp distinctions between data services like AOL and the Internet. You got your internet account through an independent service provider, and as far as content went, you were on your own. AOL and CompuServe were totally different. They were primarily in the content business. Virtually all of AOL's goodies came out of the same basket, a big server computer in suburban Washington, D.C. And in fact, a large part of AOL's appeal to middle America was exactly that. The internet had an image of a lawless international jungle with the black beasts of pornography and corruption lurking behind every tree. Even worse, in those days you couldn't go shopping there. AOL was American, it was run under American law, and it promised to be a wonderful shopping mall. Well, nowadays, that distinction is extremely fuzzy. AOL has proved to be no more resistant to the pornographers than was the old Internet. The Internet itself became a shopping mall, and it ceased to matter to most AOL subscribers whether the screen they are looking at right now was generated in AOL's big computer or in some garage in California. Until quite recently, AOL still had some unique advantages. One was the so-called buddy list. That's a small database of friends that all AOL subscribers maintain in order to exchange instant messages with each other as they work. Well, last year, in an agreement with Netscape, AOL allowed people outside their walled city to join in the buddy system. Sites that are officially known as portal sites and that I'm calling super sites are a direct challenge to data services like AOL, conducted entirely on the web. One example is Snap. That's a huge site developed by CNET, which has been a trendsetter on the net since very early days. These super sites can be personalized to offer you your own local weather reports, stock portfolio, and your own personal selection of news and gossip. They hope to be a sole source for people who are too confused by the vastness of the web. Their philosophy is, spend all day with us, we have all you need. And indeed, these sites do offer an impressive range of activities. Games, classified and personal ads, yellow pages, horoscopes, and so on. This, for example, is Snap's version of a chat room. It's quite sophisticated, and it requires a plug-in addition to your web browser to operate. It has many of the features of Internet relay chat. It has private as well as public conversations, file exchange, and so on. These things are so popular that a minor industry has grown up to offer therapy to chat addicts. Super sites like Snap seem to be doing very well for advertising sales. They are not overreaching the technology, and I predict a very bright future for them. As national sites, they aren't very good at the meta-entertainment that companies like mine provide, the local movie schedules and so on. But I don't think our advantage is going to last forever. It's perhaps worth re-emphasizing that the whole raison d'etre of the super sites is that many people now despair of hacking their own path through the internet jungle. It's notoriously hard to get accurate estimates of the true size of the web, but we do know that it's very, very big. A recent survey by IntelliQuest estimates that there are at least 320 million web pages to choose from. And since that survey was conducted last March, we could safely assume another perhaps 10 million pages by now. No wonder then that subject searching is a ceaseless activity on the web. This ticker tape here is displaying some of the keyword searches that are currently being undertaken by a well-known search engine called the web crawler. You can't possibly keep up. The crawler deals with tens of millions of requests a day. Of the 20 most popular websites, 7 are searches. Sites like this one that merely display what other people are currently searching for are called meta searches, and it's a very postmodern form of amusement. Well, here's a more personal measure of the growth of the web. In a book I co-authored back in 1995, I explained the techniques of web searching using as an example a lookup for information about the possibility of life on the planet Mars. Using the web crawler, I showed how merely entering the keywords Mars life produced 467 documents worth taking a look at. Well, entering that same simple query today produces 137, 482 pages. Fortunately, all of the modern searches and indexes offer much more sophisticated search strategies to control this spate of information, including Boolean relationships between your search keywords. Some searches and indexes are almost blossoming into supersites themselves. Once again, competition for numbers drives them to offer attractions that will tempt more users. One of the most interesting web developments of the last 6 months was the introduction of a translation engine by AltaVista. AltaVista is a highly sophisticated searcher operated by the Digital Equipment Corporation. The AltaVista translation site can translate text between 6 languages. Just to illustrate, I fed it some sentences I just spoke and requested a translation into Spanish. Here's the result. Algunos los investigadores y los controladores, paso a paso casi, están floreciendo entre los supersites ellos mismos. De nuevo, la competición para los números los conduce a las atracciones de la oferta que tentarán a más utilizadores. Okay, apart from my accent, that's not a very good translation. And I'm quite sure that our own interpreter, Monica, did a far better job of it when I spoke those words originally. Nevertheless, I do believe that is a service that's very well worth having. Just like the mail list example I gave earlier, the availability of translation service opens up the interactive society to a wider range of people, and that's great. The experts say translation robots will never be perfect. I'm sure that's true, but I do applaud AltaVista for having had the guts to make a start. Checking up on the searches while preparing this talk, I was struck by one thing that's very relevant to the interactive society. There are many tools now available to search for not information, but people.